Welcome to Beautiful Salvage. If you are new here, we love to take you on our junking adventures, show you how we upcycle junk, and occasionally give you sneak peeks of the Beautiful Salvage brick and mortar boutique. I was planning out my summer projects last week and I knew I wanted to create a fun butterfly collection with a shadow box that I had picked up. And as I kept creating, I had the idea to make sort of a butterfly exhibit in the boutique, which now I'm super excited to set up. I came up with 5 different butterfly projects for this video that I'm going to share with you. Make sure to leave a comment and tell us what your favorite project is out of this collection. And of course, if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. A while back, I picked up a shadow box that I had an idea to put a faux butterfly collection in, and was in search of tin butterflies to put in it, and I finally found some on our 100-mile garage sale adventure, which we have in our Junkin' Adventures playlist on our channel if you want to see that. To make over the butterflies, I first painted them and decoupaged them with recycled paper. I just layered different patterns of paper on and kind of made sure that the ripped portion was the portion that was up against another layer, just so that it didn't have stark straight edges. It was a little trickier decoupaging on the surface just because it wasn't flat, so I made sure that I pressed it down pretty well. It looked like a hot mess, but after the Mod Podge had dried, I just tore the paper and it came off pretty easily. I would tear it up towards the back of the tin just so it doesn't tear off the whole entire piece. This did take some time, but I thought the results were totally worth it. To get into the tiny little tight spaces between the flowers, I used a screwdriver. I had tried to use the utility knife, but it didn't work very well. The screwdriver got in between there a little better. The look of the tin flowers and butterflies turned out so pretty and way more beautiful than I expected. Next, I worked on getting the shadow box painted in a creamy antique white. For most of my projects, I use chalk paint or sometimes milk paint. I decided not to paint the inside walls of the box and just left them in a wood color that goes well with the creamy white. To paint inside the latch, I just took a little tiny paintbrush and worked my way inside there, and it worked really well. After the paint was dry, I took a damp rag and I wet distressed the piece, and I probably let it sit for a little too long where it was kind of hard to rub off the paint, but I just worked at it kind of like a piece of sandpaper, and it did come off and ended up distressing really well. I sealed the piece with clear wax, which highlighted the distressing and gave it more of an antique-y look. I've had this cork board for years in my stash and thought this would be the perfect project to use it on. So I marked where it needed to be cut and drew a couple lines using my square. After cutting my pieces of cork, I used hot glue to glue the cork down. Then it was time for the fun part, rearranging and arranging my tin pieces. I also printed off some public domain images from Pinterest of butterflies and cut the vintage descriptions out. There are quite a few public domain images of butterflies, and it's really fun to pick and choose which ones you want to use for a project. I printed mine off on vintage paper and then just ribbed the edges so it would give it a more vintage and authentic feel. I would have rather had the camera at a different angle, but I'm new to YouTube, so I'm just kind of figuring out how the angles should be, and I'm looking forward to getting a new camera stand so that I can get better angles as I work here. If you like what you see, make sure you subscribe to our channel and come along on our YouTube journey with us. I drilled holes in the butterflies so pins could be poked through the wings like a butterfly collection would have. Even though everything was getting pinned, I still wanted it to stay in place really well, so I did hot glue all of the pieces. And the last step was just to clean up the glass, and oh my goodness, I'm not one to usually decorate with butterflies, but this project turned out absolutely beautiful. I'm not sure whether I like this project the best or the last project that we do on this series. The next project is a pretty simple project. I just took a frame that I found at a yard sale and painted it in a sage green color, wet distressed it, and then white waxed it. I took those same public domain images that I found on Pinterest and put them in the frame. I used the back piece of the frame to trace my shapes out that I needed. And I didn't center this. It kind of bothers me, but it did turn out okay because the vintage ring that's kind of a mirrored look isn't centered either, so it does look okay. So these back pieces were originally attached to the frame itself to kind of be like a swinging door. So I decided to hot glue them and it would make everything more secure. This was just a quick little project that turned out super beautiful to match all of the other butterfly decor. So for this project, I printed off some butterflies and came up with a cute little poem and wanted to put them on some amber bottles that I recently collected. My idea was that I wanted them raised above the glass or the amber bottles. So I took air dry clay and put my image on and traced around it with the knife. The picture kind of stuck to the clay so I could mold it a little bit better. I did the same thing with the little poem that I came up with. Here I'm just kneading the clay to make it a little more pliable. Now I did glue the paper onto the clay before the clay dried. I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out, but it turned out just fine. I used all-purpose Titebond to glue everything in this project. I had gotten these little upholstery tacks that were copper toned a while back, and I thought it would be really cute to put them each in the corner of the little poem like it was tacked onto the bottle. There was a little bit of a curvature to the bottle, so I did glue the clay on before it dried so that it would take on that curve. I had leftover tin flowers from the other project that you saw, so I just did the same exact method as I did before. So then the tin flowers could be put into the cute little bottles. This turned out to be a cute little project, perfect for our butterfly display. So for the next project, I started off with this really ornate frame that I had picked up at a garage sale, and I thought it just needed a little update with some white wax, so I put some white wax on it. I cut a backboard out of some pegboard that I had on hand and covered it with some drop cloth. I just hot glued the drop cloth sides first and then lastly the corners. I have been waiting a long time to use this vintage hardware that I had found, and I thought this was the perfect project. The green hardware is the back of a drawer pull, and I just thought it was so beautiful and looked like butterfly wings. And then for the center of the butterfly, I used a cabinet door handle. My original thought was to attach the handle through the holes of the pegboard, but then I decided to put my butterfly at a slant or at an angle, which required me to drill through everything and create new holes. I love the green paint that was left over from years ago, so I decided to clear coat it so it wouldn't chip anymore. I felt like it needed something more added to the picture, so I found some vintage lace and kind of toyed with the idea of putting some more vintage descriptions on there, but in the end, I decided not to put anything else on there besides the lace. I did add some tacks, which kind of give it a little more character. The tacks are so small, I just grab them with a plier and then nail them down. I ran out of fancy upholstery tacks a while back, and I kind of wish I would have had them for the holes in the hardware, but I just use what I have on hand. I don't want to go buy anything, and so I just find whatever I have in my stash to work with. The tacks were actually a little long, so I had to hammer them down and make sure that they were not sticking out the back of the board. And then I usually like to finish off the back of my projects. It just feels like quality work when something is finished on the back side. You can shop for any of the items that were made today at beautifulsalvage.com. I had an old table that I didn't want to fix. It just didn't seem like it was worth it. The legs were very wobbly and broken and cracked, so I took the legs off and I used the top of the table for the back of this project. Using the concept of making butterflies out of old hardware, that's what I wanted to do with this board, is mount butterflies to the board. So I started off by measuring everything, but then I noticed that there was a line down the center of the table where the laminate came together. So I used that as my guide, and I wish I wouldn't have. You'll see later on why. I used air dry clay. I wanted to put some description words and stamp the description words in the air dry clay using IOD stamps that I have. I could have gotten a little nerdy and looked up different types of butterflies and stamped the descriptions of butterflies in the air dry clay, but I just decided to put the word butterfly on and then number 1, number 2, and number 3. I painted tight bond quick and thick onto all of the air dry clay and just glued the clay to the board. This project actually took me over a course of a couple days just because I wanted the clay to be dry before I painted it, and then I had to wait for the paint to dry. But it did turn out to be probably my favorite project. Now, my air dry clay did crack quite a bit, but I don't mind that. It gives it more of a antique-y look, which I love. And right now I'm just distressing it here with a wet or damp cloth. Just getting some of the paint off and making it look more antique-y. And then for my wax, I did end up mixing a white wax and a dark wax. Usually I use Waverly wax in a liquid form if I want to mix the colors. I wanted my lettering to really pop, so my plan was to put the wax into the letters and then kind of wipe it off so then the wax sits inside of the grooves of the letters really well. I just love the effect that it has. It turned out so cute. I waxed the entire piece then and just went around with my rag and kind of blotted all of the wax so that it wasn't an even coat and it just looked more distressed and antique. There are so many different ways that you can make butterflies out of hardware. It's so fun, and I thought I could paint the hardware, but I kind of liked the brassy tone. I guess it's a personal preference, but I might venture to do similar projects like this that have painted hardware as well. So this is the project that, out of everything, didn't go as smoothly as I would have liked. So for some reason, my measurements were off. I'm not sure whether it's because I followed that center line and I shouldn't have. But anyways, my butterfly was very noticeably off center. So I ended up taking some spackling and just filling the hole that I had drilled and waited for that to dry. And then later on, took some paint and just blotted the paint on with my finger and then waxed over it. I mean, it was hidden underneath the handle anyway, so you can't really see the mistake that was made. It's kind of like measure twice, cut once type of thing. I should have measured a few times before I drilled the hole. But anyway, it turned out just fine and you can barely notice it. I just put some hanging hardware on the back of the piece and it was ready to go. It turned out so beautiful and I love it with some of the other butterfly decor. And I can't wait to make the butterfly display at the boutique. Well, that wraps up our butterfly projects for the video. I will probably be creating a few more projects for our store exhibit. If you are interested in anything that was created today and would like to purchase it, you can find it at beautifulsalvage.com. This has been a really fun video to put together and I hope all of you have enjoyed it like I have. Thanks for watching and have a beautiful day.